Hi, I'm Seamless, and today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. Good old citrus layered shenanigans happening inside here. All that good stuff. This patcher preset is available down in the description of this video. Inside the zip file that contains it also contains a serum wavetable that I made out of this recording of the sound that you're hearing here. Special thanks to Razer for providing me with the ridiculous laptop that I'm using to do all this thing, the Razer Blade Pro. Funny thing about this particular edition, when they asked me which model I wanted, because there were different Razer Blade models, I was like, give me the biggest and the best and most ridiculous one, and they did, which is awesome. But the classification of laptop this is called desktop replacement. It's a little bit funny, and it denotes a kind of laptop that's not really that portable. I mean, it's portable. It's a lot more portable than a literal tower or computer is, but it's heavy, it's big, and it's not as cool as like to move around like the Razer Stealth is. That's smaller kind of laptop, but it does effectively entirely replace my desktop. The whole setup I have here, let's actually look at this for a second. The whole setup I have going on right now, I have this main monitor up here that I actually have FL on here, and this monitor is not really doing anything right now, but what it's supposed to do is that this is actually a touchscreen monitor, and I can use this to trigger FL's playlist performance mode clips for when I want to mess around with doing recordings with the synth stuff, which is still over here. The laptop itself sitting up over here on top of this, just a drawer, because like I could have it over there, but I don't want to lose all my desktop space. Having drawers is a lot like having desk layers. Connecting to this monitor via a Thunderbolt to DisplayPort cable, which is a tremendous waste of this guy's one Thunderbolt port, because I could get one of those dongles that gives you like a whole motherboard's connectivity up there. That may be something I can do eventually. In the meantime, I have this 10-port USB hub, which has every single one of my numerous devices all running all at one time happening in here, going right to the one USB port on this side. Actually, there's more on the other side too, but all I have over here is the power cable, and then this is the HDMI port. With the cable in it, it's going up to the monitor up there. And with that, this setup that I have is the exact same setup I would have if I had my old desktop still going, but it's been replaced. I just wanted to point out that it was kind of funny that something actually lived up to the desktop replacement moniker, which is like when I saw that classification of desktop as like laptops. Normally, you see those crazy like gigabyte laptops that are like basically tower computers with monitors attached to them, and not something like this over-engineered, ridiculously awesome thing. Anyway, let's talk about the sound. So I said this is layered shenanigans, and what's going on here is I have three kinds of FM that I'm basically crossfading through, but not so cleanly. To begin here, let's actually hear what this sounds like without it, although let's keep in mind, actually, the last couple How to Bases people have pointed out that I don't tend to start these from scratch. I don't tend to like begin with a naked one of these and show how I actually make these parameters be what they are. And sometimes that's bad. I should be doing that for a lot of things where I can, but oftentimes I can't because I did not make those decisions at this stage. I didn't listen to the citrus by itself and said, okay, I'm going to make this sound like this. Like, I got it as far as I could get it, and then I did some stuff to it, and then I did some stuff to it, and did some all the other stuff I'm going to do to it, and then I kept changing things. I kept changing basic parameters, and that means now that they're going to sound like something that I can't predict from only the citrus. But it is still handy to hear what's going on without all the stuff, so let's listen to that. What's happening is that this is combining essentially three layers. We have this kind of simpler bottom tone, a busier mid-tone, and a much higher and much like denser high-frequency thing. What's happening here is the number one guy, you can see in the volume on the X mod, because we're coming in, the macros are coming in to automate X and Y. It's just X, right? Yeah. Yep. I'm automating X through the main macro. I'm also automating the panning of the unison. There's unison happening right now. Without unison, this is what this sounds like. It's a little more straightforward. Because that's the whole point of unison, is to create the convolution via phase cancellation. The kind of FM that gets... actually, before we talk about the FM, we'll talk about the crossfading. So we have volume and we have mod X here, and then on 1, 3, and 5, you can see that there's different kind of automation present for it. So here's one. When the X goes up, it says it comes on, and then it comes off, and then 3 comes up in there, and like you can see, there's a little bit of overlap going on in there, especially number 5, where it's kind of a little bit slimmer. And these are the decisions that I made with all the processing on, because the value of these layers are that they are, through the macro automation at different points of it, that certain ones are different levels at different points. But there's also a little bit of combination happening when they get crushed into things like distortion. So an amount of like this guy that isn't very well pronounced into with this guy, like if this guy by itself, like it has the rhythmic portion of it because it's the one at the end of the macro that actually still sounds like it. The middle one does too, kind of, but less so much. Like the individually, like I've in the past have attempted to get like, you know, this sort of performance out of just individual things, but layering is just a lot easier, isn't it? And the whole purpose of layering is to get the conflict to conflict together. So this was 3 things that are coming together. Let's actually talk about the main FM. These are 2 shapes that are basically the same control. Let's actually get a new citrus up here to show you what that does, just so you have a frame of reference. In each of these here, like you have various kinds of shape controls. We have the main shape changer, which changes between the basic shapes, and then a pulse width altered version. And then this is the tension mode, and this is what we're changing in that first sine wave. We made one of them look like this and one look like that, which is basically the result of a specific and similar distortion. Like if I ever have one of these, like this is that kind of made it look like it was bowling over a bit. And then this would have actually, I guess that wouldn't quite be the same if I did like this. Experiments for later. Point being, that's what I did to make the shape like that. These are the same pitches, so they're not really doing a lot. This is not a very complicated tone to come out of there. Number 3, number 4 is taking advantage of a particular fun thing that you do with FM, which is when you take a higher tone and you FM it by a much lower tone. Not that low. Point being is that it takes on the characteristic of that lower tone because you're whipping around that higher tone at that tone. Benefit to this is that I'm using the output of number 3 to be that higher one, and I'm modulating it by the lower tone in number 4. Number 3 itself is just a sine wave. Number 4 is not. Like this is a very. This one involves the skew parameter. The skew parameter, like the tension guide, just changes the shape a bit. But the fun thing about the skew parameter is that as a source, or harmonically rather, what I'm talking about is that this actually imparts some of the saw series. What I mean by the saw series, because it's still all Fourier stuff, is that when you do this to a sine wave, you get square wave. I mean, it looks kind of like a square wave if you push it hard enough, and so you're going to get square wave harmonics, which looks like the saw wave series, only it's every other harmonic as opposed to every harmonic. But when you do it like this, you actually get some of those in between harmonics from within the saw series, which matters in certain applications of FM. I'm not totally sure if that was the reason I used that here. No, because it is still a lower tone anyway, so I would have gotten what I needed to do out of it. I guess I just did that because. A lot of things I do, I just do because, and then later I figure out why it mattered. This guy also has a bit of a skew, but is much higher pitched. It's an octave higher, and it's being modulated by something that's also much higher pitched, and also with the sine folding thing going on. That's what this is here, is a sine folding. And that also imparts higher harmonics on it, and the higher frequenciness of it is what's creating the sort of the noisy but sort of, God, it's hard to describe that sound. It's really hard to describe sounds, isn't it? It's a high frequency FM event, and I muted it. Yeah. So that all happens inside there. Oh yeah, other control that's important is so the volume things are there, and then I'm also modulating the modulation of the FM itself. And then I'm also changing the volume of some of them, and that's a bit of a weirdness because changing the volume of the modulating operator and changing the modulation input of your modulator is the same thing in this case. So I literally could have just merged these 2 shapes, and this shape and this shape, and it would have made more sense. I've inverted the polarity on some of them, which is what the directions on these knobs imply, by the way, except for the panning and FX one. Well, panning is just panning, FX is still polarity. But this is an amount of FM this way, and this is off, and then this is the same FM, but with polarity different applied. This is the output at this direction, then it's at this direction, and then it's going to be output at the opposite polarity. This is just what that does. Yeah. So what happened after that is that I put them into different chains of similarness to it, right? So we have this top end here, and they're both going into fruity balances that have their volumes going, and I really could have done this much simpler than I did, but I'm using 2 of the articulators just to say, just cross-rate them. Difference here being that here I'm crossfading between 3 things, and now I'm crossfading between 2 things. It's cool because you can think about like how bricks are laid. You get your 3 layers and your 2 together, so that means you get overlap in the way that the macro crosses together. But yeah. So that one sounds like. I mean, this is what this one sounds like. What's cool about the bottom parts of macros is that they don't really sound right when you hear the automation by themselves, because the whole point is that they're playing together. And of course the sub that I have going through all of this. But let's talk about the actual distortion happening here. And get rid of all this crap. And just listen to distortion. So remember what came out of here, right? So this is what the original sound was. It's got the crunchy middle, like the squelch, right? And the squelchy middle bit going on, and then it has the sort of the high frequency wash at the top end, and then they blend together through distortion to impart kind of each other's qualities on each other. In particular, the lower frequency ones are going to impart themselves quite a bit on the higher frequency in terms of a textural application. This kind of distortion, although light, I guess that goes all the way through. So this is what is a little bit like what guitar tube amplifiers do, crossover distortion, where you get this little bump in the middle here. Because if we looked at this in terms of a bipolar graph, where we see the positive and the negative oscillations, you can see like the oscillation will be normal-ish kind of, and then this happens, and then and then whatever. This is sort of what kinds of distortion does to certain kinds of guitars and certain kinds of amps. Something I learned from oldie FL Guru videos. How cool is that? And this guy is a bit just not any of that. This is something else. And the sort of the difference between this and this is that this kind of keeps it like it's a normal progression, while even though it's like, being distorted and pushed in one way or the other. But this curvature creates a kind of well, we're about to hear it, the different texture. So this guy's distortion turned this into this. And this guy's distortion turned this. Oh, and this guy's I'm apparently also automating the pregain. And the graph and its motion should really tell you why that's important, other than just making things quieter or louder. You can see how the shape happens here. You see how this white line showed up and then it stopped right where it was. Depending on how loud the thing is, it won't interact with your whole graph. Like this is from this side to this side is a measurement of loudness. So for the graph to do whatever this shape that we put here to do, it has to be loud enough to actually get up there to do that. So automating the pregain actually changes how much of your wave shaping gets applied to whatever sound you're doing, which is why I did that there. But that turned out into this. Loudness is what it turned into. And then both of these get put into their own vocodexes, which are fairly typical stuff, but I made an effort to kind of make them a little bit different, just so that you don't get the same vocoder's sameness in there. Because any individual setting I make of vocodex at all, like, did I do anything crazy? Yeah, like this guy. This particular quality that occurs here is going to, this is a spectral idea, so this is going to occur the way it's going to occur no matter what. And I can't move this. I can't move where the bands lie, and like the cuts, they stay where they are in the spectrum, even if you move up and down in notes, which is usually enough to like make it still sound interesting. Like that kind of unmoving nature is usually the part of the vocoder I try to avoid the most. And if you have just multiple versions of it with a different like approach to what the bands look like, then you just move between those, you get the quality that changes with the change in quality of your modulation. So that removes some of the issue. You can tell this guy was super duper loud. I actually turned the sound goodizer off for both of them. Yes. And we're using just to minimize the impact of unnecessary dynamics change. Usually a sound goodizer is fine. So pretty balances, they're at their level. This one's a lot louder. And did I change the graph on that? Nope, they're doing that. So that's just the automation the way it is. Did I change the levels anywhere? I changed levels here. So, but in between these cuts, I change these connections rather. I make changes to levels, because this guy was a lot louder than the other guy, so they had to kind of be a little bit balanced. And then they get EQ'd individually, but mostly it's high passing and removing specific issues. Of course, that sounds hollow and ridiculous because we don't have that in there with the sub. Yeah. And then the compression that's happening here, I don't think anything too crazy. Nope, just very the OTT style compression with just crunching all the stuff, and doing it pretty also on the master. Very not special. High passing a little bit and then low passing it. The higher frequencies, especially because of how high this guy went on the bottom area, and because I'm also doing no oversampling at all, which means aliasing for days. It's cool to kind of like cap it off up there. Yeah. You might think you like a high, like a forced presence up there, like really push the high end, and it does kind of feel nice. But something called ear fatigue happens if you do that for too long. It starts to diminish how well you can detect those frequencies. And you're not, I mean, you are damaging your ears, but it's not going to result in ear damage unless you do that just forever. So it's not so much a good idea to do that for all the stuff. You can kind of feel it. Like if you feel like if you just kind of stop listening to something and you're sitting there in silence for a second, and you get this kind of vague burning sensation in your like eardrums, like inside your ears, it's because of that. Don't do that. Yeah. So that's this sound here, and that's, I believe, yeah, cool. So we have this sound, and we have the recording in there for the Serum wavetable. Again, thanks for Razer for giving me the ridiculous machine by which you're seeing me do everything that's happening here, including the recording. It's really badass. I've never had a laptop that adequately allowed me to do what I do in the studio, like on the laptop. I can actually take this to a hotel somewhere and do the exact content, provided probably crap with me. In the past, I've had laptops that, like, I would go someplace and be like, oh, cool, I'll just do a video when I get there. And it's like, okay, you want to run XSplit? No. But this guy doesn't give a fuck. Also, if you would like a free month trial of Splice Sounds, go in the description of this video and get yourself the code that's there, because that's there too. If you have any questions about any of that whatsoever, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And, as usual, have a nice day.